Can just a single glass of alcohol make you more immoral? So, that is a question that actually a surprising amount of researchers are asking. Most likely because alcohol is linked to things like aggression, but also things like criminal action. So, we see that a lot of people commit crimes while they're under the influence of alcohol. But scientists are wondering, is this correlational or is this causal? So, is it just that people who are more likely to commit crimes drink more alcohol, or is there something about the actual act of drinking alcohol that might make someone more immoral? And turns out we can do the science to find this out. So let me tell you what they found, but first let me explain what morality is so that you can understand how alcohol changes it. So when they measure things like moral reasoning, what they're looking at is how utilitarian you're going to be. So this is the classic trolley dilemma that you probably heard about in Good Place, but you also might have heard about in literally anywhere else. We talk about this all the time. So the trolley dilemma is basically like one of two things. First, you have a trolley that is just heading down this track, and you are standing next to a lever. And you know that if you pull this lever, it will make the trolley move to the other track. So down the track that the trolley is currently heading are 5 people that are 100% going to be killed by this trolley if you don't pull the lever. And if you pull the lever, what you'll get is a single person who will die. So it'll go to a different track, and then the trolley will run into that person instead of the 5 people. So the utilitarian decision here is that you should pull the lever to save the one person instead of allowing it to hit the 5 people. Now, there are some suggestions that the utilitarian decision is technically the correct moral decision. That depends. So people have different responses to this. And I actually use this as an example in my class all the time because people with higher levels of autonomic arousal are actually kind of more sensitive to these types of dilemmas. So what I do in class is I give them some of these moral dilemmas, including that lever trolley problem. And then basically I ask them, how uncomfortable do you feel with this dilemma? And then we move up in terms of discomfort. So the second level of the trolley dilemma is that instead of just pulling a lever to move the trolley to a different track, instead you are literally pushing someone off of a footbridge. So in this hypothetical scenario, there is a person who's standing on top of a footbridge, and you know that if you push them off, they will land in front of the trolley will stop, and so you end up only having that one person who eventually dies instead of the 5 people. A lot of people will be like, yep, I will pull the lever in the first case, but I am not pushing somebody off of a bridge. And the more uncomfortable you feel with that idea of having to push someone off a bridge, the higher your levels of autonomic arousal are. So it's basically how much do you feel those emotions? Do you feel super uncomfortable when just being asked about a hypothetical situation? You might have high levels of autonomic arousal. And in fact, when I do this in class, I once had a student who just put for their in-class assignment, their actual response was F you. Because apparently just asking them was too much. So probably high level of autonomic arousal there. And what we see is that alcohol maybe influence this decision making. So there were a lot of different studies that showed that the higher levels of blood alcohol that you had, the more likely you were to be a utilitarian. So you're not likely to choose the emotional choice of I'm not going to harm anybody. This is what's happening. I will just let it play out. Instead, you were yeah, I'll pull that lever. And in some cases, yeah, I'll push somebody off that bridge too. So the early studies were yeah, there's this correlation between blood alcohol content and that utilitarian judgment. But then later studies were yeah, we don't see this. Even when we do experimental things, we give them alcohol and then we look at their moral reasoning, you didn't see much difference in terms of the moral reasoning. But you did see other differences when you looked at other types of morality. The first interesting difference, not directly relevant to moral reasoning, but kind of, is that we actually saw that alcohol decreased empathetic responding. So they would look at somebody's face who's displaying an emotion, and they were less likely to mirror that actual response. But this wasn't true in the case of pain. So they could empathize with pain quite well, but they wouldn't empathize with anything else. But there was a more recent study that went a little bit further in a genuinely wild way. So what they did was they had the appropriate control groups. So they basically gave people either juice with nothing in it, so that's the full control group, or juice with a spray of alcohol, so that's the placebo group, because when you smell it, when you're going to drink it, it smells like alcohol, but it doesn't actually have enough alcohol to produce any sort of effect. And then the third group got just a juice with alcohol in it. So you have alcohol, the placebo, and the control. And they were specifically looking at different types of kind of morality here. So this was more the social morality. It wasn't moral reasoning per se. And they were curious about this because they're yeah, so we see that high carb, low protein breakfasts make people more likely to punish someone for violating social norms. So obviously we should look into alcohol too, which What? We see that a high carb, low protein breakfast makes somebody more likely to punish somebody else for violating social norms? How have I not heard of this? But anyways, it seems like maybe alcohol could make people more likely to punish someone for like doing something like standing backwards on an elevator or standing too close in the line for something. And there are early suggestions that say that, yeah, people who drink, specifically while they're under the influence of alcohol, are more likely to actually disobey social norms themselves. So be loud, do dumb things. They are potentially more likely to be impulsive. Again, that's a debate though. And they are more likely maybe to want to punish others. And so that's why they did this study. The premise of the scale is how much money do I have to pay you to do these various things? Like, is there a level that you are 100% not going to do this? And is there a level that you're like, yeah, I'll just do this for funsies? So they asked them about a variety of different things. So how willing would you be to stick a pin in a child's palm? How willing would you be to say no to helping somebody move, even though they just helped you move a month ago? What about cursing your parents to their face, but you can apologize for it later? I like that it specifically says that. And also things like, how much money would I have to pay you to attend a performance art piece in which you and everybody else is supposed to crawl around naked on stage for 30 minutes and urinate? For all these questions, they were like, okay, how much would I have to pay you? Like a relatively minor amount of money up to $1 million, or like, no, I would never do this ever. They'd have these people come into the laboratory. They were supposed to drink their juice with or without alcohol. And then they basically had them sit and watch a nature documentary on either Yellowstone or Iceland for 50 minutes so that they could get drunk enough. And then they had them do the scale. And here is what they found. They found that alcohol had some interesting consequences. People in the alcohol control condition required fewer incentives to actually go ahead and hurt somebody. So they were also more willing to, quote, kick a dog in its head, comma, hard, which really, y'all, really? And I might be a little sensitive because I just came back from the emergency vet with one of my foster dogs. And so like I'm already at the injured dog stage, but no, that is wrong, which I guess is the point of the question. And people who drank were also more willing to engage in impure acts. So the like crawling around on stage. They also could ask about things like cannibalism, or willingness to like smear excrement on somebody. Those are other impure questions. They were more willing to harm other people and to do impure things. Now, scientists are still trying to figure out like what parts of morality is alcohol actually influencing here. Like, is it just reducing your social inhibition? So maybe you were more likely to do that anyways, and just drinking brought that out? Or is it actually changing morality? Or is it making you more impulsive? And so you're more likely to not think about the consequences? All of those are possibilities. And we don't know right now, but we are doing the studies on this. And the early results are not good for alcohol in terms of, yeah, it might make you more immoral.